Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you joining us from around the world for this informal briefing on the upcoming high-level political forum on sustainable development, also known amongst friends as the HLPF. HLPF 2022 is just around the corner, taking place in New York from the 5th to the 15th of July in New York. And I'm excited to be moderating this session today around the main messages, topics, and expectations ahead of this year's HLPF. My name is Trine Schmidt. I'm a policy advisor with the International Institute for Sustainable Development, IISD, and part of the SDG Lab at the UN Geneva. And this session is brought to you by the SDG Lab, IISD, and Cepei in partnership with the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs and the civil society platform Action for Sustainable Development. We have a packed 1-hour program for you to get you ready for HLPF. We'll be hearing from speakers representing both the UN and civil society, covering many different aspects of the HLPF, ranging from a look on the program, themes, SDGs under in-depth review, as well as a look at the voluntary national reviews, and last but not least, the voluntary people's review. I'll do my best as a timekeeper, politely nudging our participants and speakers to stay brief, so that we have times to take a few questions from you towards the end. So please post your questions in the Q&A function here on Zoom, and we'll make sure to get to those towards the end. To open our briefing, it's my great pleasure to hand over the floor to my colleague, Edward Mishaud, Senior Advisor and Interim Director at the SDG Lab. Edward, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Trine. On behalf of the SDG Lab at UN Geneva and IISD, I would like to welcome all of you to today's briefing. I would also like to thank our colleagues at UN DESA and Cepei for co-hosting, and of course to Action for Sustainable Development for joining us to speak. This informal briefing is a key moment to provide an in-depth take on this year's HLPF, and is an activity that we, the SDG Lab and IISD, have been doing for the past several years. And it's a service that we gladly provide to SDG actors and stakeholders everywhere. Having the United Nations, civil society, member states, and other stakeholders meet in an informal way ahead of the HLPF is so vital to ensure that everyone is on the same page when it comes to what to expect, who is doing what, and what are the common opportunities and avenues to amplify and share information and perspectives. Such a conversation is central to enhancing dialogue during and after the HLPF, because this forum is so vital to our work. The high-level political forum is the mechanism for transparency, accountability, measurement of progress, and raising awareness of the SDGs. In a way, it is our collective compass to keep the promise of the 2030 agenda on track. So through that lens, the HLPF is really more than just an annual gathering. And this year's forum is taking place at a time where we know the world is falling behind on the SDGs, and where the current trajectory of progress does not take us to 2030. But there are rays of light. The rich discussions, countries' voluntary national reviews, and the other reviews, as well as the actual HLPF ministerial declaration, will hopefully provide the additional momentum and urgency to accelerate the SDGs in the years ahead. And finally, pre-COVID, we hosted this briefing actually in person here in Geneva. And now, because of the ease at which we can gather virtually, it's really great that we are able to open up this platform to anyone around the world. And with several hundred participants joining us now online, it is encouraging to know that the topic of the HLPF and of course the Sustainable Development Goals are important to all of you too. So thank you again for joining, to our presenters, and of course to the participants, and I look forward to a very lively and dynamic discussion. So thank you, and Trine, back to you.
Thank you very much, Edward, for those opening remarks, really situating the forum that we're heading into. So before we move on to our excellent panel of speakers today, I want to do a quick test of your knowledge on HLPF. And don't worry, I don't think it'll be too hard, but you can join us by logging into Slido. So you can use the QR code there on the screen. My colleague has also dropped the link in the chat. So please join us for a little quiz to get started to test your knowledge on HLPF. We have 5 quick questions for you, and I think we'll be starting in a few moments when we see that people start to come into this quiz. There's the QR code and there's the link, and I see some people starting to join. We'll just give you a little more moments to work out the technology. It's nice to see a lot of names popping up here on the screen. Okay, I think we're soon getting to a critical mass, and I think we are ready to launch the quiz. So get ready for 5 questions on the HLPF. First one, which of the following goals is one of 5 SDGs selected for in-depth review this year? SDG 2, 10, 13, or 15? And let's see, there's some disputes there between climate action and life on land. And the correct answer, of course, is life on land. So one of the 5, we'll hear more about that later on. Next question. Which of the following sessions is not a session at the 2022 HLPF? Let's see, we have almost half of the participants saying that it's not a session on SDG 3, and the correct answer is indeed there'll be not an official session on SDG 3 this year. Next question, please. Which region has the most countries presenting a voluntary national review in 2022? And again, we have a very sharp audience, 50% almost saying that it is Africa, and let's get the right answer up. And indeed, it is African countries with as many as 21 VNRs from African countries this year. Next question. When is the SDG Summit happening? And here also an overwhelming amount thinks that it would be September 2023. Let's get the right answer up. And indeed, the SDG Summit will be happening September 2023. And this is the 2nd time that there'll be an SDG Summit during the since the launch of HLPF. And the next question. Oh, that was the last and final questions, and we even have a winner. So congratulations to Vico Barman. What a sharp one there on HLPF knowledge. Thank you for that. So last thing before we move into our panel of speakers, we will be launching a platform where you can go in and write up your expectations for HLPF 2022. You can also find this at Slido, so using the QR code or the link. So during the session, as panelists are presenting, please feel free to go in continuously and add your expectations, things that you'll be watching, what your interests are for this year's HLPF. So this will be open towards or throughout the conversation, and we'll get to it again towards the end. Now, I am pleased to open our panel with the next speaker, Irena Zubcevic, who is the Chief of Service at the Sustainable Development Branch of the UN Department for Economic and Social Affairs. She'll be speaking to us about the program and the theme of this year's HLPF. Irena, thank you for being here, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Trine, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. I will start by diving in because I know we have a lot of unpacked program. I have seen from Slido that you are all already very familiar with this kind of logistical and issues that will be discussed at the HLPF this year. So you see, we'll be starting very soon, actually this coming Tuesday. It will be an in-person meeting, which is really exciting. And it will have the thematic and voluntary thematic reviews, and we have all seen the SDGs that will be discussed. And they are 4 on education, 5 on gender, 14 on the ocean, 15 on the life on land and biodiversity, and 17 on global partnership. And the theme is building back better from the coronavirus disease while advancing the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So these are all the things that will happen at the HLPF at the official meetings together with the voluntary national reviews. And I'm going just to talk very quickly on all of that. But just to say that we are really excited that the HLPF will be in person. However, we also know that the context for the HLPF has changed. We originally, when those themes and everything were negotiated, it was expected that the world would be on the way to recover from COVID-19, and that we would be getting into the other end, so to say, of the tunnel in a better way. But now we all know that the geopolitical situation is such that we are facing a crisis that are caused by the war in Ukraine, and also that the conflicts in the world themselves have increased, and that it all impacts our lives, starting from food security to energy, finance, trade, and so on. So we are sure that these discussions will in the HLPF will of course reflect this geopolitical situation. And as we have already heard, we are not on track to achieve the SDGs, unfortunately. But at the same time, we do think that this HLPF should not be about doom and gloom, but should really be a place where things can actually be discussed and solutions found, so that we can start going back on track and really trying to accelerate all the actions to get us to the 2030 mark. So in the thematic sessions, apart from those SDGs, as you know, we are also going to have the sessions on financing, science, technology, and innovation, countries in special situations, actions at the local and regional levels. There is also going to be a 1-hour session on launching preparations for the SDG Summit, which most of you know is happening next year. We are very happy that we were able to bring back 2 important people to New York who managed the 2015 post-2015 development discussions, and those are the Ambassador Kama of Kenya and Ambassador Donahue of Ireland, and they will be together with other important figures in that process, like Paula Caballero, who was at that time diplomat from Colombia, and also we are going to have a EU commissioner, and the moderator will be the executive director of UNITAR, Nikhil Seth, who at that time will led the secretariat support to the 2030 agenda. There is also a session of Leaving No One Behind, which is entirely organized by stakeholders. And we have a lot of high-level people coming in. So you have the Secretary General and the President of the General Assembly will speak at the opening of the ministerial segment. A Deputy Secretary General will open the HLPF on the 5th of July. and she will also close it. We have presidents of Botswana and Portugal. We have deputy prime ministers of Thailand, ministers of China of the CBD COP and UK, executive director of UN Women, and so on. We are also going to have a performance of the 60 voices of children's choir Sing for Hope. That will be accompanied by an SDG piano, which is also very exciting. And we have about 170 high-level speakers. You can actually put us through the next slides because thematic review we already talked about, and maybe just to say something on the presentation of VNRs. So as you have heard, we have 44 countries, and we have only this year 11 first-timers who always get more time. So you see that we have more time, and then second and third timers have less time. But what is good this year was something that the president of ECOSOC promised at the beginning, and he delivered, and that is to have more time for interactive discussions. So this year there will be more time, and we are very excited about that, so that we get more in-depth views on the VNRs also at the official meetings. You can go to the next slide. You will see here, I won't dwell too much on that. These are, you can share the slides later on. You see here the breakdown of the regional, of the regional VNRs. And you see also, as many of you knew, was that most come from Africa. The next slide, you see something which is a timeline of the HLPF, since we are at the very end of it. I won't go into all of that, but many of you have been engaged in these preparatory processes leading to the HLPF, be it on the SDGs or in the regional forums. And of course, we are, as I already said, we are expecting the high level participation. And I already told you that we have so many high level people already there. And we are excited that we can have a good networking also through that. We have some very interesting unofficial parts of the HLPF. Here you have some of the special meetings that will be held, which are usually the meetings that last either for a half a day or a day on very interesting topics. So and we also have throughout the SDG learning, training, and practice. As every year we have the launch of the FAO of the state of food security and nutrition in the world, which I think is very topical now, because we all know that food security is very high on everybody's agenda. And then we have the Higher Education Sustainability Initiative. And then we have also the local and regional governments forum, chief sustainability officers, which we usually have every year, as well as the parliamentary forum. And this year, in the run-up to a high-level meeting on water that is going to happen next year in March, we also have a special event on water. We have around almost, I would say, about 250 side events, which have very different topics that are connected to the whole program, the HLPF. And we also have 19 VNR labs, which, as you know, are the spaces where countries can delve more in depth into the voluntary national reviews. And I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Irena, for a very comprehensive overview. And maybe just a very quick follow-up question with hopefully a quick answer. We see in the chat someone's asking, is it possible to participate at the HLPF virtually this year? What's your quick answer to that?
So there will be no okay, let me say it this way. HLPF will be webcasted. It will be also live streamed through YouTube and Facebook. And we are going to have international sign language and closed captioning. So we are trying to make it as accessible as possible. The HLPF this year will be in person. So majority of speakers, panelists, discussants, respondents will join in person. for a very limited number of people who, for whatever reason, are not able to come to the HLPF, but we have put a lot of effort for everybody to come. We raised funds for stakeholders. We worked with the US government to get visas for everybody. So for a very limited number of people who are not going to be able to come, and they are either a speaker or a panelist or a discussant, and they will have the virtual link that they will join. But there will be no virtual participation as we had it in the previous 2 years, because the HLPF is in person this year. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for clarifying that point. And Irena will be with us till the end, so we might be coming back to you for more questions. So thank you again for this presentation, Irena. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague with the SDG Lab, Evgeniya Altukhova, who is the focal point for member state engagement at the SDG Lab. And she will speak to us a bit about some of the messages that have been coming out ahead of HLPF around SDG progress, as well as what the SDG Lab will be looking out for at this year's HLPF. Evgeniya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Trine. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's a great pleasure to speak to you today. High-level political forum on sustainable development is always an important moment for us to follow the in-depth review of SDGs and related discussions in New York. What are the challenges? What are the best practices, especially with the view on the inclusion of diverse perspectives and fostering of partnerships? In the advance of the forum, we reviewed advanced and edited version of United Nations Secretary General's annual SDG progress report, and I'm happy to share a few points from our reading of this key document and what we're going to watch out for at HLPF. The report was released in May. It is designed to inform the discussions at the forum and provides a global overview on the current situations with sustainable development goals through the inputs from more than 50 international and regional organizations. There is little doubt of devastating effects of COVID-19 pandemic on people's lives and livelihoods. And on top of that, as Irena already said, the world is experiencing a three-dimensional war, food, energy, and financial crisis fueled by the ongoing military conflicts, which is happening against the backdrop of triple planetary crisis of climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. So let me highlight a few points on the progress on SDGs under the review this year. The COVID-19 pandemic, next slide, please. The COVID-19 pandemic ignited a global educational crisis that is affecting the vulnerable children the most and exposing a critical digital gap between different geographies and communities due to the uptake of digital learning and remote work. Examining process on gender equality, the report calls for governments to take immediate actions to ensure data availability on women's rights and progress on laws and policies against gender discrimination, as data on this front is currently very scarce. The review of next two goals, SDG 14 and SDG 15, once again highlights the interconnected nature of our challenges, noting increased plastic pollution and ocean acidification. Moreover, with overall good progress on data generation on oceans, there still remains an inadequate understanding of ocean processes and science, and the technical knowledge on these topics is unequally distributed between countries and regions. On SDG 15, the report points out that despite the efforts made by governments in adopting natural resource management strategies, such as biodiversity-relevant taxes, incorporating biodiversity values, international accounting and reporting systems, more instruments to sustainably use forests and restore biodiversity are urgently needed if we are to reach the 2030 agenda by the deadline year. With regards to SDG 17, the report highlights the good performance of official development assistance flows, which peaked last year in 2021, and foreign direct investments flows. But the need remains for scaling up international cooperation for vaccine distribution and to deliver commitments to developing countries and LDCs. Otherwise, the world risks a two-tiered COVID recovery between developed and developing countries. The SDG Lab team prepared a very convenient and official summary of the findings from the report, and we will be sharing this document with all the registered participants after the webinar. All in all, the report paints a two-sided picture of where we are with the SDGs. There are, of course, some hopeful processes that are going on, and we will follow how they will be addressed during the high-level political forum in New York. First is the ongoing digital transformation, especially how decisions will ensure a digital transformation remain for the benefit of sustainable development implementation and SDG implementation, and not just for the sake of technology. And what concrete roles stakeholders at different levels can play to make digitalization and digital solutions inclusive, cross-sectoral, and human-centric. Second, finance for green and sustainable recovery. Even though the financing gap for SDGs remains and currently stands at $4.3 trillion US, according to the latest UNCTAD report, commitments to align finances with 2030 agenda are on the rise. And as we prepare for the Building Bridges Week, a Geneva-based initiative to bring together development and finance stakeholders to accelerate the transition of financial system to sustainability, the lab will pay particular attention to the decisions on efficient and impactful SDG financing and sustainable finance, as well as the perspective of developing countries and countries in special situations on sustainable finance mechanisms. Finally, we're on the lookout for all data and statistics related advancements. Even though the data and statistical systems have long been underfunded, the demands for data, for quality data, and for disaggregated data has risen over the last couple of years, and it's a step in a right direction if we want to truly improve our policymaking and ground it in evidence. So for us, following the high-level political forum on sustainable development through the lenses of these three enablers of sustainable development, which I mentioned, digital transformation, sustainable finance, and data, helps us to inform Geneva SDG community and ecosystem on the recent developments, what can we do to advance SDGs, and how here from Geneva we can reinforce collaborations and partnerships. In addition, we're working closely with the member states, and we will, of course, be tuning into presentations of voluntary national reviews. And in this regard, I'm particularly curious to hear from my co-panelists from Cepei on this topic. We also work closely with the NGOs and civil society organizations, and we'll be paying attention to the input from major groups to HLPF and the ministerial declaration. And last but not least, we'll follow discussions on the preparations for the 2023 SDG Summit. We will mark the midpoint review of the implementation of the 2030 agenda, which is a crucial moment to put the SDGs back at the forefront of the agenda as the global framework for sustainable and resilient recovery. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Evgeniya. How much you covered in these 7 minutes. I'm very impressed. And thank you for sharing and summarizing also the main messages from the Secretary General's progress report. Quite concerning, but also thank you for outlining some of the rays of hope. The next speaker will help us get a better understanding of the voluntary national reviews. Javier Surasky is a program officer on governance and financing for sustainable development with the think tank Cepei, a partner of ours based in Colombia. Javier, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, and even good night for all. As was said, my name is Javier Surasky, and I am the Program Officer of the Governance for Development area of Cepei, an independent think tank based in Bogota using data and analysis to empower people and institutions to find paths towards sustainable development. But I am also a university professor teaching or trying to teach international law. And as such, I face every semester a hard task to convince my students that despite what they read in newspapers, watch on TV, and find on social media, international law indeed exists and works. And today, we are facing a similar common work to do regarding international cooperation, particularly the 2030 Agenda, its SDGs, and sustainable development efforts, because we are in a framework of an active pandemic, an aggression war, hungry rates are soaring, and environmental alarms are ringing. That is why the 2023 high-level political forum becomes a critical point in the 2030 Agenda follow-up and implementation. We all know we are going out of time to fulfill the promises made in 2015. It was repeated many times. Now we must deal with a downturn in trust in the UN's efforts and capacity to build the world we want and deserve. The 2023 HLPF should speak clearly and loudly to help heal wounds. And let me be clear, the UN is more than an international organization. It is more than a place in which states gather to discuss common problems or the global house for multilateralism. The UN is, above all, the brick and mortar representation of the idea that a more just, peaceful, sustainable world is possible. That is why everyone supporting that idea should support the UN and its effort. And that idea is too important to be left up only to states and the UN staff. Want it or not, we all are the UN. An inclusive and action-oriented UN relies on mutual trust. Trust is built on recognizing others as equals despite differences. And the 2023 HLPF has a major role to play in this regard. In conflicting times, the 2023 HLPF would provide political guidance to navigate across troubled waters. Following the St. Kitts and Nevis last-minute decision of not presenting its VNR, this year, the HLPF will host 44 voluntary national review submissions on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development national implementation. Quarter of them will come from countries that are first-time reporters. By the end of the 2023 HLPF, only 7 countries worldwide will have not submitted at least one voluntary national report. Sadly, among them, we can find the United States, major world player without any doubt. That means the voluntary national reporting, and I want to underline the word voluntary, is a success, at least formally. It still needed to work hard on the quality of the reports. Now that second and subsequent VNRs are the new normal, we should quickly move from situational reports to cycle reporting by building second-generation VNRs. If you still don't know what a second-generation VNR is, I invite you to read Cepei's work on this issue published back in 2019, and I will be sharing with you the link in the chat box after my presentation. But what we expect to see is an increased commitment to VNR quality-related issues this year. And why we have such expectations? Because providing answers to current sustainable development challenges is requiring more integrated and systematic efforts. And those efforts will be at the core of the reporting process. To overcome the COVID-19 pandemic, we need to understand what failed in preventing and responding to the virus spreading. We need to learn from our good and bad practices, and we need to look to COVID-19 future impacts in multiple fields to be prepared to face them. And more or less could be said regarding threats to peace, breach of peace and acts of aggression, to take the words of the UN Charter, or to refer to the ongoing efforts to include ecocide as a crime against humanity to be judged by the International Criminal Court. Many other issues that will define our common future will follow the same path. And one more time, the 2023 HLPF has an essential role to play. Next year, the second SDG Summit, that is the HLPF meeting at the head of state and government level under the auspices of the General Assembly, will take place. And it should send a strong message on the 2030 agenda ambition and adopt the actions needed to accelerate the SDGs implementation. This year, high-level political forum would set the stage for it. The 2023 HLPF includes a session on working towards the 2023 SDG Summit. Its debates will be critical and will contribute to setting the path towards the summit for the future. And also to discuss the Secretary General report, Our Common Agenda, that contains recommendations across 4 broad areas for renewed solidarity. The Our Common Agenda report was elaborated as a result of the UN 75th anniversary declaration and presents the Secretary General vision on the future of global cooperation. As Antonio Guterres has summarized it, the spirit of the document is humanity faces a stark and urgent choice: break down or break through. The choices we make or fail to make today could result in further breakdown and a future of perpetual crisis, or breakthrough to a better, more sustainable, peaceful future for our people and planet. And let me highlight that the choices should be made today. So the 2023 HLPF should at least give a big push to adopt breakthrough decision. Moreover, this year HLPF finds the UN, and I will close very, very soon, sorry.
Thank you.
This year HLPF finds the UN implementing the United Nations Development System reform at the national, regional, and global levels. And this issue should also be supported by the decisions taken in this year HLPF. And to conclude, I feel that this year HLPF should be the most forward-looking HLPF session ever met to meet the expectations. So to present you my main expectation from this year, it is that the high-level political forum will recover the spirit that the states established at the 2030 agenda and make the high-level political forum and space to facilitate sharing of experience and to provide real political leadership, guidance, and recommendations for the 2030 agenda implementation. I thank you.
Thank you, Javier, for those remarks and for your perspectives on the development of HLPF looking towards 2023. Now, time is running and we have so much that we want to cover. It's a pleasure to hand it over to Uchita de Zoysa, who is the Executive Director of the Center for Environment and Development in Sri Lanka, and also here representing the civil society platform Action for Sustainable Development. Uchita will tell us a bit about the expectations from civil society and also include the voluntary pupils review. Uchita, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I hope my slides will be on so that I can get on very quickly. Thank you and greetings to everybody across the world, and hopefully HLPF will be more inspiring than it has been so far. Next slide, please. Let me start with just stating that I, as the chief negotiator for Sri Lanka in 2016-2017 for the HLPF and the SDG process in the world, I just recall this from the internet, and I just thought that I will make it. First of all, I had said that stakeholder engagement must not be limited to mere consultations, and would not be complacent by simply providing a space for constituency statements, giving 2-3 minutes the maximum. If sustainable development is to be truly the transformative agenda of the world, then the stakeholder and public must have a sense of ownership, and that the SDGs should be capturing the imagination of the people in a way that they can actively engage in the transformation, as transformation will not merely come through simply policy processes alone. So if the relevance of HLPF is if it can encourage governments to engage in an inclusive transformation and recalibrate the context and honest partnership between the state and non-state actors with greater intensity and urgency. May I go to the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Yeah, so let me also make reminder that history has shown that there have been summits and follow-up processes through summits, and that the world is not in a better place continuously. World continues to go from one bad place year, and then we come in 2012, 20 years later, to understand that there has been no political commitment and the world is in extremely a dangerous place, and that we need greater urgency. So the 2030 agenda comes in because a 2021 agenda for a whole century is not working, and we need to get into an urgency of 15 years. Now, in between, I want to remind that the Commission for Sustainable Development, I've been to all the summits since 1992, participating in largest processes from organizing the People's Treaties in 1992 downwards, is that the Commission for Sustainable Development after 1992 First Earth Summit, many of us believe that it failed tremendously to hold on to the promises made by leaders of the world at that time. Now, the second part is that now CSD is replaced by HLPF. Now, the HLPF is called a high-level political forum simply because a Commission for Sustainable Development could not push the urgency for transformation on Earth, the agenda. The question now is, how political is this forum? Is it just going through mere motions every year, just bringing in governments to read out statements, and civil society and other stakeholders to be in different rooms, rather than having a one-on-one dialogue and debating as to where we are, taking on a stock as to where we are, and strategizing together? Is HLPF providing us that forum? That is a big question. I have, as the chief negotiator for Sri Lanka for 2 years, I didn't see that. And as a civil society person and a stakeholder person, I have not seen that. And this is the discussion that continues. And because of that, countries are getting scot-free, not delivering the promises that they make when their leaders come to summits. Next slide, please. Now, perhaps the only mechanism that brings countries to some accountability is called the voluntary national reviews. But the VNR, now this is where we need to figure out, do VNRs provide actual insight into local to global transformation? Are they really telling the truth to us? Are they representative of whole of government or whole of society? VNRs, from our experience, including my country, Sri Lanka, seem to be presenting a complete different picture to the ground reality. The same today. Are they derived through a methodological approach to data collection and analysis and review? They seem to be majority of them, other than a very few handful of countries, just sending very complacent reports, which does not represent anybody else other than just a cover-up saying that everything is going fine and just highlighting a few issues. If the world was so good, as the VNR say, we would not be in these meetings and these rooms hammering ourselves time and time again. How can HLPF assess the progress if actual transformation or gaps are not honestly reported? This is the problem. Where is the dialogue between governments and stakeholders? Where is the space for stakeholder reporting? How are global assessments made without inclusive reviews? HLPF must recognize people and inclusive transformation, not dividing people into different rooms and sectors and creating greater fragmentation. In Sri Lanka this year, through my organization, we are coordinating 4 reviews. The first one is called a voluntary people's review, the first of a kind in the world, which came in 2018 to HLPF. Second one is a voluntary subnational review with the subnational governments that we are conducting. Third one is the People's Scorecard, which we are working with the Action for Sustainable Development platform. And then the voluntary focus reviews. This time we are looking at SDG 16 Spotlight report, supported by the TAP network as well. Next slide, please. Now, this is what we are trying to do. We believe that any review must be based on a process and a methodology. We take a very deep 2-tiered methodology. First one is called a micro assessment. Second one is called a macro assessment. A micro assessment is basically looking at the targets and indicators. We are reviewing the 169 targets through the 244 global indicators. Sri Lanka has not localized its indicators, so we are looking at that. Then the macro assessment is about the transformative items, integration, coherence, mainstreaming, localizing, financing. For the first time in the world, I believe that we are running through, and IISD has accepted for the People's Scorecard the methodology that we are proposing for assessment, a -5 to +5 scale of assessment. This is extremely hard, and we have brought in hundreds of experts, dozens of regional, sub-regional, and national level government officials, stakeholders from civil society, trade unions, business and industry, with a huge amount of young professional researchers truly managing this process. This is not just about emotions. I'm finishing off.
Uchita, sorry for the interruption. This is incredibly interesting and very comprehensive. And I think we will, with your permission, share your slides after the event.
I have one more slide.
Okay, I'm afraid we won't have to go into all the details, but please, if you could make your final remark, and then we will.
Yeah, I'm on time, Trisha. I'm
Thank you very
myself
much.
as well.
Thank you.
Finally, recalibrating the context. We have done loads of research. In 2020, we came up with the book called Localizing the Transformation in the New Normal, a domestic resource mobilization framework. Countries should have had domestic resource mobilization frameworks at least 5 years ago of the 7 years that has gone. If we are not going to recalibrate the policy context, the localizing context, the financing context, and the transformation context, we will be just tinkering around the bushes without addressing the systems. So finally, the relevance of HLPF is if it can encourage governments to engage in an inclusive transformation and recalibrate the context for an honest partnership between the state and non-state actors with greater intensity and urgency. I hope HLPF would be more meaningful this year, and that the future summit next year, it will lead to a future summit of real futures. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I know it's a lot to cover in a short amount of time, but it's very interesting to hear about the work that you're doing. And we'll be sharing the slides with participants following this webinar. So now we want to make sure we have a little time to follow up on some of the questions we've had come in via the chat. I'm going to start opening with 2, and then we'll have time for a few more. So first, I'm going to hand it over to you, Irena, to answer a question around the 2023 SDG Summit. What are the options for participation here, and especially when it comes to civil society? And then secondly, I will turn it over to Javier on the VNR reports. As someone says, we see that more time has been given, but is there anything else that we can do to challenge the VNR more rather than just give more time? So Irena first, and then over to Javier. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this question, which is an excellent question. So first of all, the 2023 SDG Summit is actually the officially its name is High Level Political Forum under the auspices of the General Assembly. So it is still the High Level Political Forum. And as you know, the civil society organizations, major groups and stakeholders, they have quite a lot of mandated and guaranteed engagements with the HLPF, which will still stay for the SDG Summit, even though the level of participation is at the summit level. And what I wanted to draw your attention to, there is going to be this session, dedicated session on the 7th of July at noon, New York time. And we, as I said, we had really been working hard to bring those who actually worked on the conceptualization of the SDGs and the 2030 agenda to be there. So you are going to hear from them how they think the SDG Summit should look like. But I can tell you from our end that we are looking at the whole year of preparations. And there is also a mandate for that in the latest resolution on the HLPF review. It is saying that the HLPF under the auspices of ECOSOC in July 23 should be preparing for the SDG Summit, but there will be also a lot of preparations, and the role of the stakeholders will be crucial in them, because we have to have different action pathways and to show where we are in 2023, because this is de facto is a midterm review of the SDGs, because the next summit will be in 27, which is too close to 2030. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Irena. And Javier, and perhaps also Uchita would like to comment on the question around VNRs. So aside from giving more time for discussions for the VNRs, what else can we do to challenge them to really make them a meaningful exercise? I'll start with Javier, and then Uchita, if you want to add as well.
Thank you. As I was trying to underline in my presentation, now I think that the real challenge is to moving from presenting VNR to presenting high quality VNRs. And to do that, we need to see the reporting progress as a whole. For example, if we want better VNRs, we need to create a cycle between past and present VNRs, but we also have the opportunity to take advantage from the regional sustainable development forums. For example, a very concrete idea, the reporting countries could use the regional forums to present at least the plans they have to build the VNRs, instead of presenting main IDs documents 60 days before the HLPF that in fact are not very helpful. I think that the presentation during the regional forums on the path to build a high quality VNRs could be very important and could help to gather different actors and to provide momentum and push from the VNR building processes. So there are many, it's impossible to refer to all of them now, but there are many opportunities to work towards a higher quality VNRs building processes.
Thank you for that. Uchita, would you like to add something to that?
100% agree with Javier, but let me tell you that quality VNRs must be based on methodology. A VNR is about an honest stock taking as to where the country is, where the gaps are. Now, what we are trying to do is, we don't see this happening in countries, most of the countries. Very few countries are doing this. First is that by just reporting on the surface of issues makes no sense. Number one, if we are coming to HLPF and presenting, it must go deep down into what the indicators are telling in your country. If you have localized, yes, go to the localized. It must be based on data at the first premise of it. Second is that this is not about just monitoring based on indicators. This is about a transformation agenda. Where are the big ticket items? Are you integrating environmental, social, and economic into your whole frameworks? Is there policy coherence between the three dimensions? Have you mainstream? Have you localized? Localizing is not happening. There's serious amount of marginalizing of even the subnational level governments in all over the world. So number one is HLPF's fundamental objective is to assess where the world is moving to, rather than just hosting convenient seminars. Now, also, it is the responsibility of stakeholders, particularly to do their monitoring, not write feel-good spotlight reports alone. I think both parties need to be doing their part and coming to the table, and coming to the table not as country citizens alone, as global citizens. That is the forum that we need to do. So VNRs are fundamentally essential if we are to take stock year after year. Otherwise, we will be failing. In Asia Pacific region, they are saying that the agenda is not 2030 anymore. It is 2067. Not because of COVID. Let's be very careful. COVID is being used as a scapegoat, but countries have neglected. Countries don't even have localized agendas, strategies, policies to do this. So HLPF must take it. It's a high-level political forum. It must act accordingly.
Thank you for that, and thank you for highlighting the responsibilities of both parties in really coming together with an honest stock-taking process. I think that's very important. We have a lot of questions in the chat. I just want to ensure that we will be following up with the expectations that we started off in the beginning. So we will be following up with the slides of the presenters. We'll be following up with information that you can use for HLPF. And so to wrap us up today, it's my great pleasure to hand it over to Lynn Wagner, who is the Senior Director of Tracking Progress at the International Institute for Sustainable Development and the Director of the Earth Negotiations Bulletin. And Lynn will share a few words with us around how you can stay connected, up to date, and well informed during HLPF. Lynn, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you so much to the presenters and also to the participants for joining us. We really look forward to helping you track what's going on in the next 2 weeks. As Edward said, we had a very packed agenda today. We did our best in this last hour to share information on what to expect, what to look for, how to engage in the HLPF. But this is a really big agenda. We all need everyone, pulling their weight and engaging and digging in to find partnerships, to find ways to implement the SDGs in their corner of the world. And so we have a number of resources to help you follow what's going to be happening over the next 2 weeks, and also to be following what's happening with the SDGs. The Earth Negotiations Bulletin will be there at the HLPF. We'll be writing daily reports on what's being said during the main negotiations and main discussions, and then a short summary report at the end to help support you to follow what's going on. Our IISD's SDG Knowledge Hub is a year-round news source on what's happening around the world on the SDGs. One thing in particular that we're following there is the negotiation of the ministerial declaration that Irena mentioned. So that is negotiated in the UN, but not necessarily during the HLPF itself. And so we already have some updates on what's happening with the ministerial declaration, and we'll keep you up to date as we find out more. The HLPF has a new website, official website. We hope that you'll look at it. It just makes it the UN's organized all the HLPF resources that it has in a much more kind of dedicated, focused way. So be sure to visit that. As I think some people have added to the chat, this meeting will be streamed live on UN TV, as it has been in the past for those who aren't able to be there in person for whatever reason. So be sure to tune in and see what's happening. And the sessions are uploaded as recorded sessions soon after they finish. So if the time zone doesn't work for you, be sure to watch. And then after, immediately after the HLPF, we'll be having another webinar giving you a debrief of what we saw. Again, as I said, this is a really big agenda, and there's so many different things that are coming into this meeting. Right now, the UN Ocean meeting's happening. There's a meeting taking place on road safety with, discussing SDG target 3.6, which is one of the targets with the 2020 date. At the end of the year, the UN Biodiversity Conference is going to be taking up the Global Biodiversity Framework discussions, and those are more 2020 targets that need to be revisited. The UN Ocean Conference, the WTO just came to agreement on SDG target 14.6 regarding fisheries subsidies. The UN Environment Assembly preceded this, Stockholm Plus 50. The World Urban Forum just concluded, talking about our cities and how that piece of the SDG agenda. There's so much going on leading into this, and so many things that the discussions at HLPF will feed into. The Transforming Education Summit during the UNGA in September, in particular, the G20 Leader Summit, of course, the Sharm el-Sheikh Climate Change Conference. There's so many things that that are feeding in, that are interlinked, and so be sure to tune in, to check out the resources that I mentioned, and just to engage, stay engaged. And it's so wonderful that we'll be able to, so many of us will be able to be together in the next 2 weeks, and to kind of reinvigorate and refocus on what the SDGs mean, especially leading up into that SDG summit next September. So thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you the 18th at the end of the HLPF, and look forward to hearing from you on what you're doing with the SDGs wherever you are. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Lynn. And also from me, just a big thank you to all of our speakers and all participants for joining us today. As always, we wish we had more time to stay here and discuss with you in this rich content, but this is just a pre-HLPF. We will see you all at HLPF very soon to really dig into these conversations. So for now, we'll be following up with you all who registered with this information, and I'll just wish you a good and productive HLPF. And that's all for now. Thank you very much. Have a nice rest of your day.
Thank you very much.